Hey everybody, you're listening in to Burst G-Back TMD from Auckland. Welcome to episode 14 of the Real-Time web series. This week in the studio, we continue to unfold the story of graffiti in New Zealand, and seeing his work first in the early 2000s, we have Levi, otherwise known as Elroy from MCF and DFH crew. Welcome, man.
Cheers, bro. It's good to be here.
So for the people tuning in for the first time, the Real-Time web series is an in-depth process video meets podcast. I basically document the visual process, and you ask the questions online, and our artist basically gives us the answers. And we basically start building, the knowledge base of New Zealand graffiti from scratch. So kicking straight into the episode, could you tell us when you first started writing?
I'm like most kids in the late 80s, early 90s. I came up with a tag or tags when I was 11 years old, about 1988. Yeah, I think I was like Lethal and Scum was another one that I came up with. My friend, he had cane. He was like, yeah, like cocaine. We didn't even know anything about drugs or anything, but that seemed kind of cool. And then it wasn't till 1994, I think I did my first tag with a spray can on a wall in Melbourne. And yeah, my first tag in New Zealand was probably later in 1994.
Are you born in New Zealand or are you Australian?
No, I'm from New Zealand, born in Auckland.
Right.
Yeah.
So at quite an early age, you were already in Australia?
Yeah, when I finished school, my parents never paid for us to go on holiday overseas or anything, so I'd never been overseas. So I just worked for my stepdad and saved up money. I was going to get a Vespa. And then this girl I was seeing broke up with me, so I was like, flag this, I'm just going to get out of here, and went and travelled around Australia for 6 months.
What actually got you into writing?
I think it was probably skateboarding in the early 90s. Companies like New Deal and World Industries, Mad Circle, Underworld Element, which became Element. Everyone they had b-boy characters, and people started dressing in big baggy jeans and old school sneakers like shell toes and that. And so we were kind of and we were listening to hip hop. And so I don't know, to me skating was sort of like being a graffiti character. I just started really loving the aesthetic, and for 7th form art, I started drawing people at Aotea Square skating and hanging out and wearing those clothes. And it was kind of like b-boy characters meets art. Yeah, and so that, I guess it was, just skateboarding, because it was the conduit for being exposed to the culture that was happening in America, because we didn't have the internet or anything. It was skateboard videos and magazines that let us see what was going on.
How did you actually come to select the name Elroy, or were you always writing Levi?
Around when I was 16, would have been 1992, hanging out up at Cheapskates, and all the dudes I was hanging out with, they were like, fucking Levi, fucking Leroy, fucking Elroy, and they were like, dude, we're gonna call you Elroy from now on. And so I got nicknamed Elroy. And so around that same time, it was I was doing I started MCing, doing rapping, so it was MC Elroy. It was just Elroy seemed like a cool name. No one I knew was called Elroy, and it was my nickname, so yeah.
Were you painting any of those other names?
No, I wasn't even painting then. I was just drawing on my books, and I guess just learning about letters and things. But yeah, I guess it was pretty much when I got nicknamed Elroy, and then I started MCing just after that, and I started drawing outlines of the name Elroy, which was kind of annoying because I really hated the OY. It was always really difficult.
When was your first actual piece?
My first actual piece was in, I think it was 1994. It was 1994, probably the end. And that was with, my second piece was with Dion Daff in Combat Zone, and it's in the background of Damn Natives video, and it's real toy. I think I was already trying to get abstract before no one taught me about doing basic, sort of sign writing letters. I didn't start getting into doing basic sign writing letters till a lot later.
Were you part of any crews, or were you kind of going solo, or?
I wasn't in any crew. Basically, there was a few crews around. I saw what Daff and MKA, Merkster and R&B were doing, and then I met some other guys like Disguise Auckland Disguise, DJ Potts, and Ken's Kenobi, he was Obi-Wan back then, and Cripes, and they're all in Jedi Knights, JKS. Like Jedi Knights was just like this thing that Disguise started.
Yeah, as a graph crew.
Yeah, everyone was really just tagging mostly then. It was like just sort of looking at what was going on and trying to suss out how to do it, you know. And then I don't know, I ended up hanging out with Ken's. We became real good mates, like Kenobi and Cripes, and I used to love wearing hats. Like I had like the mean hat collection, and so like I came up with the name MCF, Madcap Fools, and just because I mean Daff was like the dope ass freaks, and MK was like moldy kick ass, and like I didn't really feel like we were invited to be a part of that, and whereas Dion got welcomed in, but we were kind of like the outsiders, and so we were like, well, you know, we didn't really give a shit about a lot of stuff, so we were just like, yeah, we're just fools, you know. Madcap.
So you started MCF?
Yeah, pretty much.
And so who were some of the people that were in that crew?
It was like me and Cripes, and then it was me, Cripes, and Ken's, and then I don't know, it just kind of grew like as the years, not even the years, like it just like then it was like Larrikin, Gideon, Nakota, and there was also like around that time DFH started, and so a lot of us were sort of like MCF, DFH. But yeah, and it kind of MCF actually kind of like kept growing. It got pretty big at one time. Like it was mostly taggers. Like there was only a few of us piecing. It kind of got a little bit out of control.
Could you tell me a little bit about DFH? What does it stand for, and why was this second crew created after MCF?
Well, it was different people, you know.
Okay.
It was like we started MCF, and there was dudes like Risk and Cons and Doyle and Pyro and that, and they started DFH, which was the Fly High, drunk fucking horses. These things happen. Yeah, and like I guess one crew was kind of like more like a Wreckers, and MCF was a bit more like dudes that wanted to piece, you know.
Being a part of both of those crews, how important was it for your graffiti to actually develop and for you as a person, as a writer, to improve?
Well, I mean, we had, like I said, like we weren't a part of, you know, like DAF, or they were the guys that knew. They were the holders of the knowledge, because no one knew anything, you know. It was like we learned from them through other people what paint, you know, like Tana, Tucson, where to find the right spray caps, you know, and things like that. But it was super important for us, because it was like we had each other, and we were all kind of like just learning and making mistakes and kind of not caring so much about it, and heading in our own direction and trying to, you know, like tell our story, I guess.
What is one of the craziest missions that you've actually done through graffiti?
We did a mission down to Wellington. I think everyone's probably got like a Wellington train story, like, and I'd never painted trains before. So we did a mission down there, and with like Smack and Eunuch and me and Kens, and yeah, just like going down and like going into a train yard for the first time, and sort of like smelling what this train smelled like, and getting chased, and not actually getting to finish a piece there, but then going to Paikokariki, and it was just like, it was actually scary because it was so quiet, and then you work, sort of like trying to do pieces, and then you've got people like Eunuch and stuff who are like climbing up on top of the trains and like dropping things and making noise, and like, but it was just because it was so quiet, because it's such a small town. It was like every noise was just like amplified, and it was terrifying. Like I actually did like one panel, and I was like, I just want to get out of here. Like this is like, and I kind of didn't know what the deal was, you know. I was sort of like, yeah, you're meant to get in, do a panel, and then get out. And Ken's was just like, he did like about 2 or 3 panels, like just
He was chilling.
he was just going sick, and I was just like, I found it a bit stressful. I don't think I've ever really been a great train bomber or anything.
What is an ideal place for you to paint then?
Yeah, like the train tracks were the best, like just because there were no trains on Sundays as well. And I always found it hard to differentiate colors in the dark. So it was kind of like I quite liked painting on like Sundays, and now and then a train would go past and they might stop and like yell at you or something, but it was generally pretty mellow, and the tracks were real pretty too. Like there was always a lot of flowers growing in spring, and it was like a cool place to hang out. It was just like your own zone that no one else went to, and you could just go down there and it was like your space, you know.
Have you ever had any chase stories from the tracks?
Yeah, we had one, because we used to paint like Mount Eden train station in the daytime on Sundays and stuff, and just kind of like wing it. And we were painting there. I think we were going over like Webbs and those guys, because it was in the middle of a sort of battle that we were having, and we were painting there anyway. I'd been skating and I'd rolled my ankle and it was swollen up, like it was so fat and purple, and I could barely walk. And we were painting, suddenly it was like, there was all these, it was like, dude, there's cops down there, and like suddenly there was like cops coming, and it was like, run. And so we went to run, and everyone was like, we ran past the ramp that goes up to the Mount Eden Road, and we ran over into the bushes, and I was limping, and I had my camouflage backpack, and I threw it into the bushes, just because I was like, if I don't have paint, you know, I've got nothing on me. And then I went to keep running, and I tripped on the undergrowth, and I fell over, and I was like, this is fucked. If I try and run, I'm gonna get snapped. So like I jumped down behind one of the bridge supports, and it kind of had like a little ditch around it, and I just like hid behind the train bridge support, and I watched like a few of the boys like run past me, and like watched like the cops run past me, like, and start climbing up this bank. And I was like, if they'd looked back at any moment, they would have seen the cops run past down the tunnel after one of the other boys. And and I was just like sitting there just going, well, it was kind of awesome, and you know, like, because they didn't look back. And then suddenly everyone was gone, and I was like, oh, are they gone? And then like I just like limped off in the other direction, and, you know, like I said, I could barely walk, and like just limped off, and I escaped, and like a few of us got away, but I know Cripes got, he was like hiding in someone's backyard, and some lady rang the cops.
Wow, sounds like a close call.
Yeah, it was awesome. And then like we didn't finish our pieces, and we came back, and Webbs and that had been down there, and he'd written heard you guys, because it's Auckland, man, everyone hears about everything. Heard you guys got chased. Elroy's a limp ankle chump. And I was like, oh, and I wrote, better a limp ankle than a limp dick. They didn't catch Elroy.
Oh shit.
But that was yeah.
Beef
Sorry,
on the wall.
it was fun, man. Like respect to Webbs and like all those guys, you know, like we had some fun battles, and we pushed each other. It was cool.
Was the kind of culture of graph at that time during the 90s and early 2000s, was it quite hostile?
Yeah, I mean, when Tank came, like I know on all the other videos and the interviews, you know, everyone talks about when Tank and the Australians came, and they basically just stirred everything up and started going over everyone. And, you know, before that there was like the infamous Riot Merkster battle, the Bomber versus the King, the King Pizza.
Tell me what that is. I don't know anything about that.
Well, like Riot was like this punk rock skater who I knew from skateboarding earlier, and he just bombed everywhere. His throw-ups and his tags all over New Zealand, like he was the bombing king. It was like Cat, but and he'd tag on your piece just so that you'd know that. Like when I met him, I was like, why'd you tag on my piece? And he's like, I just wanted you to know that I'd seen it, you know, like. And but so he did that to Merkster, and then like him and Merkster, like, you know, Merk would come down to the tracks, he'd be like, he'd be painting or whatever, and he'd be like, Elroy, you've been hanging out with Riot, I've seen you shit talking, you know, I'm gonna find him, I'm gonna smash him. And yeah, like Merk would come down there with his brother, who was like massive tattooed ass dude, and you just always be like, he'd be looking for someone, and you'd be like so stoked that he wasn't looking for you. And so we were pretty young, you know, I was like, and I wasn't a big dude, so like, yeah, that was pretty gnarly. So that was my introduction when I first started doing pieces. That battle was happening, And I remember being down in the tracks and in Combat Zone, and Merc had finished a brand new piece, and I was like doing my piece, and Wright came down and he was like, oh, you're Elroy, because we knew each other through skating, and I was like, I had no idea, and he was like, oh look, Merc's done a new piece. He's like, oh, Merc's a dumb cunt, and he like picks up one of his he's like, he leaves all his cans in front of his piece, and he picked up one of his almost empty cans, picked up a cap off the ground, put it in the thing, and capped his piece in front of me. And I was just like, that was like, whoa, like, I was like, that's why Merc was so pissed when he came down, and he was like, you've been riding with Riot, like, because that happened while I was there. And I was like, but I wasn't like gonna step in and try and stop it, but yeah, so like that was the original beef. I don't know what happened before that, but and then it was all pretty chill until I mean, it was, I don't know, there was territorial, it was a little bit territorial, and everyone was like, I guess there was a lot of egos, and I guess we've seen Star Wars, so we thought it was all about battling too, you know, and it was like, that was the template that we were given. But yeah, when Tank and that came, they just started going over everyone, like, and, you know, you could try and be their friends, and they'd just rinse you out, like, they'd just use you, try and take your weed and your paint and whatever. So we kind of like recognized that straight away and just went, oh, fuck it, we've got to battle you then. So we had no skills, we didn't even know how to pressurize cans or anything, and like, you know, like you'd be doing a piece over Tank, and Tank would come down and give you pointers, which was kind of cool, like, you know, like he'd like come down and be like, oh, you know, that kill rust would be a lot easier to use if you sprayed it upside down for 30 seconds. And, you know, so it was like, sometimes he'd come down and like Kens would be going over the end of his piece, like the end of his cave, and it would say like Tank ends, and Tank would come down and be like, oh, Tank ends, sounds like something my grandmother would write. And so, and then he'd be like, oh, do you guys want to buy some photos? And he'd like sell us like photos of Australian trains for like $1 each.
No way.
And like he'd sell you like 20, and he'd be like, sweet, I've got enough to get a tinny now, and you guys want to come? And so then we'd go and like, he'd go get a tinny, and we'd go smoke with him. So it was like you were kind of battling, but at the same time, if you didn't drop your balls and you stood your ground and tried to battle back with your whatever you had, then it was, you know, it was sweet.
While we're kind of on the topic of this kind of era of graph and the kind of culture around it, could you tell me a little bit about the 1990s graffiti scene in Auckland?
Yeah, I mean, I mean, you had guys like DLT, Opto, Dan Tippett, who were like muralists, like mural artists, and, you know, they did all the legal stuff, and so like you had that, and then you had the DAF and MKA, and then just like a million dudes that do straight tags, and I know everything was just getting trashed, and there was a lot, you had to get paint from paint stores, so there was a lot of Hammer Hardwares and crazy little shops everywhere that, you know, like you had to go steal from, or this paint was really expensive. And yeah, and like hip hop was kind of like, New York hip hop had kind of come out, and so you had like Gangstar and just all that real cool, like Tribe Called Quest and Dell, like all the stuff coming out of the Bay Area, and the LA Underground, like AC Alone and all that. So I know everyone was just kind of like, it was like it was new and fresh, and everyone was just kind of getting into it and learning, and yeah, in any way that they could, making mistakes, and it was just really pure. It was a real pure time.
How do you think it actually got so big in terms of like the graph scene? When I interviewed Askew one time, he basically said, you know, everybody that he went to school with had a tag. You know, how did it get to that?
Well, Askew was a bit younger than us, and like those guys kind of, I guess we only would have been like 6 months or a year jump start, because I'd come back from Australia, and I remember hanging out with Askew and that, and everyone was freestyling. I'd hang out with Askew and Webbs, and there was like another dude, Guy, and we'd hang out and freestyle, and we'd share like mixtapes, because we'd like order mixtapes from America, and other people would have mixtapes, and You know, there were like friendships. Like me and Ken's became friends because we had he had an MC battle between Saphir and Casual, and I had the ACL and Project Blowed mixtape, and we like swapped tapes and became best friends. But like it was a wild time. And then so with the hip hop, and then hip hop, you have a rap name, and then it became about like elements. You know, we didn't really have breakdancing here, not like they do in Melbourne and shit, but it was like MCing, DJing, and graffiti pretty much. And for me, it was skating were like elements.
Do you feel like the hip hop culture was like an overarching thing that kind of brought quite a lot of the scene together?
Yeah,
graphing
and those years, those 90s were like, you know, like there was like clubs like Core Celeb, The Box, Escape, and they're all like bars where you'd go. I mean, I was only 16 and you only needed a piece of paper ID. You had to be 20, but you know, like I'd be getting into the clubs and going and like rhyming with like Danny D and from Damn Native, and Manuel Bundy would be playing, and they'd even have like live jazz band, and like so you'd be rhyming over a jazz band, King Capisi, and it was just wild. You'd go down there and you'd battle. So there was like a real battle atmosphere, because it wasn't like you'd be battling like dissing each other. It was like you were just battling over who had the best rhymes and the best freestyles about what was going on, and to get the crowd hype, you know? Yeah, so I think then the next generations, like they saw all that, and they saw all this tagging, and they saw all the original graffiti that was going up, you know, like dudes like Decepticons and that, you know, like as the years went on, like that next generation after those late 90s years all came through super hard and way more polished, and you know, it was super cool, and it did blow up, and it got pretty big, and it was it was wild. And then like new proper paint started coming. I guess there was just more knowledge out there, so people could get into it. It was more accessible.
When I think about this idea of hip hop and the kind of four elements, one of the real big things was, you know, in the early 2000s when I attended the hip hop summit, and you know, attending things like that was like a real big exposure to all these different things, and thinking, oh, that's like a complete package. But I feel like in the present day, it's not quite like that. Everything's kind of like, I don't associate necessarily graffiti with hip hop these days.
No, well, I mean, and it wasn't always affiliated with hip hop. You know, like there was a lot of, you know, like you meet people, you'd seen their tag and you assumed that they were like what they looked like and what they were into. And then you meet them, and like, you know, you'd meet like Smack or something, and he's like then most of them, that was the thing, most of them were like skinny white dudes, and like, you know, and Smack was like a more like almost like a goth, you know, with like heaps of lip piercings, and you know, and like you'd I mean, even like I remember Mareko from the Decepticons one day when we were up at the bar 420 in the 2000s, and he was like, Levi, did you tag Elroy? And I was like, yeah, bro. He's like, damn, we thought you were a massive nigga. You know, and I was like, sweet. They're like, damn, we thought that was one of our favorite tags. Like, and like, I was so stoked, but I was like, it was real funny, just because I'd been through that. But you know, like the more you started meeting writers, you were like, and it was so cool too, because their names were like their name, and then you meet them, and their name might be a little bit what they're like, or you know. It was a fun experience, like that mystery, you know.
When you really started getting into graph, what would you say were the key fundamentals that you believed in terms of what you believe graffiti to be?
Fundamentals, I mean, I always talk about the rules that we put on ourselves. Rules like you weren't allowed to mask, you know, you weren't allowed to like mask your paint or whatever. You had to like do it all perfect, like can control, things like that. And also like you just weren't allowed to bite at all. Like it was kind of like, it seemed pretty beat into us that, you know, like biting was the worst thing you could possibly do, which kind of sucked in a way, because you know, it just turned us into pricks, because like suddenly you think like, that dude's biting this and that dude's biting that. Anyone who was being influenced, you know. There were people, and then like the Australian guys came and they were like, oh, you've got to paint trains, and they had all their rules. I mean, I But I feel like the rules became less and less.
But another thing that you mentioned was about racking paint, right?
Yeah.
Like you wouldn't pay for it.
Yeah. Well, that was another rule. Was like you weren't. If you paid for paint, you're a sucker. And so it was like it had to be free, which also meant that you were dictated by what you could paint, what colors you had, and depending on what you could rack and things like that. But yeah, I mean, there are a lot of rules that we sort of followed.
Did you subscribe to those rules?
I mean, they all got broken. Every rule got broken, you know, eventually. And it was kind of like once they did get broken, it was like, oh man, why do we even have those rules? You know, it was like, I guess they were rules that were given to us by, you know, Star Wars and Beat Street and things like that, which weren't necessarily applicable on an island in the Pacific, you know. But we were kind of like living that. It was like a culture, and I'm kind of glad in a way that culture. There were really positive aspects of it, but then there are a lot of really negative aspects that just weren't really applicable to us.
During the 90s and kind of early 2000s, what type of paint were you actually using?
We were using plastic coats, and I think when I very first started, it was like spray coats. I think I did my first tag in an alleyway in Pitt Street with a spray coat, held it about a foot away from the wall. And then there was there was VHTs. There was all these touch-ups. I know Dion talked about it. Like, there was all these touch-ups that were at Jeff's Emporium, and they were like $2 a can.
Wow.
And they were just like little cans, and you put like a tungsten cap on them, and like the reds and the yellows, and like there was, and that really helped the scene actually, like, because you could maybe rack some cans, maybe buy some tungstens or tanas from the warehouse, that the distributor, and then you'd go to Jeff's Emporium and get some touch-up cans. And yeah, like Jules talked about, he was the master of, like, and same with Cripes. It was like red and yellow throw-ups everywhere, because like the reds and the yellows were the best. So like there was just like red and yellow tags and throw-ups everywhere.
And what kind of access did you have to like nozzles?
We go to the supermarket and basically look at every spray can and the cleaning aisles and all that. Whitcool's was a good one. They had spray adhesive and clear gloss, and they had tungsten caps on them. So like you go to Whitcool's, anyone who bought like there would never be a cap on this spray, like we would have boosted all of them. But yeah, and then I know Gasp was really into the Tamiya cans. Like
what's that?
They were like Tamiya model cars, like remote control cars, and they had little cans for like painting models and things. So like I know the Gasp was real big on those, and the cans, like the touch-ups too, and the tungstens are all like a small can, so you could have them up your sleeve of your jumper, like for tagging and stuff. So they were really they were kind of real cute and easy to use.
Did you used to rack your own cans too, or?
Yeah, I mean, for a while there, like, but New Zealand's a small place and I'm quite recognizable, so I pretty quickly kind of went, I can't keep doing that. But then I'd often, it's like a lot of the guys, like, we'd have other friends who are kind of more into the crime side of it, and so they'd often go and rack stuff and then you'd swap things for it, or but yeah, it was like a real attitude though, that you weren't meant to pay for paint. And even if you were like doing other things and then selling things to buy the paint, it was kind of like, it was like you were bending, it was within the rules of, like, it was still kind of free.
Other than painting graffiti illegally, do you think that graph kind of led for, maybe yourself or many of your friends and your crew to other forms of crime?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it was I think that, and because paint was so hard to access and it was so expensive, and and people didn't really get paid that much money, and even if you had like a job, you didn't get paid a lot of money. So it just, if you make people poor, then you create crime. And so it was partly the graffiti that maybe got us into other stuff, and it got a lot of people into other stuff, got people into harder things and hanging out with bigger gangsters and bigger gangs and things. So, but yeah, I don't feel like it was graffiti that got them into crime, though. I think it's poverty that probably was more of an instigator.
Before this interview, we kind of just briefly talked about the impact of meth in the early 2000s. Obviously in the previous episode with Dudes, like that's kind of one of the things that he talked about. Could you give me some commentary around that in terms of your experiences and how that kind of impacted maybe you or your crew or your friends?
We always like drugs, like just because like things like mushrooms and acid and even speed, like you could stay up and paint all night, and acid really, like, I don't know, you could see things, you could draw in like in the third dimension, and mushrooms too. Like I know that there were a lot of our friends who were really into it. But then meth kind of hit, and that was when a lot of people that had been painting and doing pieces kind of like got into more harder crime and more gangster, and there was less pieces and more just destruction. But at the same time, like meth also fueled styles, because it, when you're that high and you're drawing, you often unlock new letters and styles and shapes. So I mean, it did have some positive effects until it stops working, and then it just ended up people.
Then you're back onto the normal style.
Well, no, the thing is that you've at least still unlocked those letters, so you can sort of keep going. But it was just like, if you think that you're gonna be able to invent new letters again, it's like you've already spent that thing. But yeah, it got really gnarly. The crime got gnarly. People just were going crazy, and people were doing some crazy crime and then showing up. They'd show up with big bags of meth, and it was just like, a lot of the time, people weren't buying it and stuff. It was just like people had a lot of it, and yeah, and it got pretty hectic. I remember I ended up splitting. Like, I'd kind of had enough. I was always going back and forth to Australia to skate, and I left in like 2005. 2005. I left and just kind of got away, and then went to Australia, and it was actually it was gnarly over there too. Like, they had even like stronger, like they had like ice and things. So, and then I went to London, and then I came back, and when I came back, it was sort of like, it was still around, but it was starting to, I know a lot of people had gone to jail, or people had died, people had, totally fucked out on it, and it sort of feels like it's been on the decline, and especially like within, I don't know, graffiti and things like that. Not that I hang out with the young guys that are coming up now, but yeah, I like to think that it's on the decline,
Just then you mentioned that you also traveled to Australia for skating. So
yeah,
what's your kind of involvement been with skateboarding?
Yeah, I've been skateboarding since I was 7 years old, and like I said, in the 90s, skateboarding introduced me to hip hop and graffiti, but I was always, I don't know, like I never used to drink or smoke or anything when I was young. Like, I experimented, like I tried stuff, but I was like, oh no, I don't really need that. And I was always that kid that was just, I'd just go skate. Like my friends would have parties, and you know, when I was 16 or whatever, I'd be like bouncing around on the trampoline, you know, like sober as, while everyone else was like, dudes were like spewing up and, you know, and it was like, I was like, man, what idiots. And yeah, so skateboarding, like I got sponsored when I was like 15.
Wow.
But skateboarding was so small and so dead, like everyone had quit. So, I mean, I wasn't like a talented skateboarder. I just kept doing it and doing it and doing it and doing it. It's like when I was 16, I got hooked up by the power distributor and they'd give me like, he'd give me one board every 6 months. You go like through a board like every 2 weeks to a month. And
It's a long wait. You get a free board.
yeah, and then he'd be like, oh, you know, like, oh, we've only got these warped boards, like the concaves, like they've been sitting in the sun. And like, so it was just kind of defeated the purpose of being sponsored. But then like companies like Boom Skateboards and that started in like 92. And then that went to Australia. So it was like, we were going over to Australia and skating over there and getting in the magazines and videos and, yeah, and like getting coverage, and it was like promoting Boom. And and I started, I mean, like that was like in 94, I went to Australia for the first time and saw like, started riding trains, you know, like listening to Illmatic with the train noises at the start. You'd have that on your Walkman and you'd hop on the train and you'd have it queued up and you'd put on and have the train noises and
You're in the vibe.
and then I just watched like the graffiti down the train lines and but yeah, so like skateboarding kind of, it got me out of here, you know, and it exposed me to Melbourne graffiti, not just what the Australians brought to Auckland when they came, but actually like, and I really like Melbourne graffiti over like Sydney graffiti or Brisbane graffiti, like dudes like Murder and Puzzle and Trance, and you know, there are a lot of like the KSA guys and TGC. There was a lot of real cool graffiti going on over there, and it was like the Australasian equivalent of New York to me.
And I guess moving on, that's probably a good segue into the next set of questions, which is really about your influences, your style and inspiration. So firstly, how would you describe your style and the evolution of that? That's a tough question.
That is a really tough question. I think that when I first started, I was just kind of lost, and I was trying to do this thing, and I was like trying to throw myself in the deep end.
Yeah, what type of graph were you, in terms of like pieces, what type of style were you trying to do? Was it traditional New York or?
Well, it was wild style. I mean, I just saw what Merc and R&B were doing, and I just wanted to get wild. I wanted to links and arrows and overlaps and, you know, shit weaving in and out of each other and stuff that kind of, you know, Merc did this stuff that kind of looked like it was like a machine, like a battle machine, you know? It was kind of sharp and pointy and had screws and it looked metallic and, you know? And then, like, I guess, but the big thing for me was once I started hanging out with Ken's, I was like, he was just on his own tip. He was like, nah, Merc's doing this. You know, like, we don't want to do that. We don't want to be like, we don't want to copy him, because those guys would be like, oh, look, they're copying us. And so it was, the biggest thing was to do something that they weren't doing. And so, like, and Ken's would sit there and draw outlines and be like, okay, you're not allowed to use a pencil, you're only allowed to use a ballpoint pen, so you've basically got to do one line. When you make a mistake, it becomes part of the piece. So we learned pretty quickly that mistakes became advancements, or, you know, like new styles. And yeah, so and then, like, you know, it was always like you were trying to do all neat and tidy and no drips or whatever, and then Ken's would be like doing stuff with drips and, like, you know, like he took that Dymark style and had it so there was just like spitting, like he was doing pieces that were like spitting and doing stuff that instead of looking like a machine, it looked like some organic caves, or, you know, like. And so I think, like, that really pushed me to think outside the square. But it was hard because I didn't have he pretty much just picked up a can, it seemed, and knew what he was doing. He knew what he wanted to do and he did it. But for me, it took me a lot longer. And when I was in, about 1996, I got a job working for a sign company, and I ended up on top of the Air New Zealand building downtown, when they changed from the 70s font to the Times Roman font. Yep. And so and at first I was back where I'd taken all the letters down, and I had to strip all the fittings off them because they were big neon signs. And I was in this warehouse with these big ass letters, these big ass 70s letters, stripping all that, and I was carrying them around, and then I ended up, they were stoked on my work, so I got to go up on the top of the building for the install. Over the summer was when they were building the Sky Tower. Saw them flying in the top parts of the Sky Tower with helicopters. But I was up there and carrying these big letters upstairs, and so then that kind of pushed me to start doing simple stuff. So I kind of went back, and instead of trying to do wild style, I started doing big, sign letters, and which I did some blockbusters this big Elrone ones, and my boys called it the Crayola style because it kind of looked like the writing on the side of a Crayola crayon.
Yeah.
And I started doing that. I went back to basic letters, and then from there I gradually went wild again and worked it back into what I've been trying to do. And then soon after that, pretty much then I kind of felt like I was starting to get my own style. Even that Crayola style, when they said the Crayola style was my style, it was yeah, I've got a style.
But how would you describe the visual aesthetic, the look of your style now?
I guess I came back to it, and like I said, man, I've been heavily influenced by a few people, but Ken's was a really big influence on me, and so I feel like I took some of what he was doing, and then...
What was Ken's doing?
Well...
You've mentioned a couple of things, doing the opposite, but...
Yeah, well, I don't know, I guess he was just deconstructing letters and breaking rules, instead of, I don't know, the letters were going skinny then fat, and they weren't proportioned, It was he'd just go loose, and one letter might be really small and then the next letter might be really big, and so it was just kind of taking away the rules, and then just taking all those big sort of nice round E's and straight lines of the L, and and then abstracting it and trying to put links back through that, and and I don't know, and like I said, we're doing psychedelic drugs and things, and it just kind of happened. You're just drawing outlines all the time, trying to come up with new shit.
And so these days, are you still doing quite a lot of sketching?
Most of what I do now is probably stuff that I've drawn over the last 15 years. I actually struggle, I always kind of would try and do a different outline every time I painted, and then I quite like the idea of, I just did back in the day, people who just do a logo, or they do the same style piece over, each one's just a little bit different, and then I just I've started doing repeating pieces and just trying to do them differently or do them better, or I don't spend nearly as much time trying to reinvent the wheel. I feel like my style's kind of there, and I'll do sort of variations on the same sort of things
to try perfect it. Or was it intentional to have a repetitive?
It's an aesthetic that I'm happy with.
Yeah.
And I've reached a point with stuff that I like that aesthetic, And so now it's like, you know, trying to push that into different ways. It's like seeing how I can turn it into a concrete 3-dimensional cube. You know, it's but that's still just like that's an outline that I drew years ago that I'd done on a wall, and now it's a concrete cube. It's got 4 sides to it, each letter's a side, you know. I also did a thing where I started a formula for abstraction for a letter was to try and make each letter in my name say Levi. I called it a 5 style, so it would say Levi 4 times and then the whole thing would say Levi. And so that became a formula for abstraction of the letter, trying to make sure there was like an E and a V, and sometimes it wouldn't have like all the perfect letters in it, but it's still, and to me that gave it that style. It always had those shapes in it.
And so kind of looking back, I guess, throughout your whole past 20 odd years of graph, who would you say are your top 3 influences?
I mean, I've said Ken's heaps of times, but that's because he was my partner in crime. Then probably Puzzle, like, because I saw stuff in Australian magazines that we got. And he also wrote L's Up, which is Puzzle backwards. And so like I was kind of stoked to see someone else who had EL at the start of their tag. And I think Murder would be the other one, just because he was the first one to do 3D graffiti. And it wasn't just that, he brought in a lot of like weird Aztec looking stuff, and he just seemed like he really stood out to me from the moment I first saw his stuff.
Anybody from New Zealand?
Definitely. You know, like Aaron B, Merc, and then pretty much, I mean, everyone who was painting, like, I mean, there was a lot of people doing some cool stuff. Wox, like, when I started painting with Wox in like 2004, just when there was, I don't know, everything had become kind of stale. I guess it was like, that was sort of around that hip hop summit sort of time, and everyone was doing this real clean New York style, polished, you know, like it was like you said, it was the package. And then I saw like Wox just doing these, they weren't like the prettiest letters, but he was just getting loose, like he was like a hurricane on the wall, you know. And so he was a massive influence. But dudes like RFC, like Webbs, Fury was mean. Like his tags were just always so good. And like Sen's, like I had a terrible battle with him, which actually started, I didn't even start it. Some other dudes in my crew kind of started it, and just because I was the one still piecing, kind of like, and then I think once someone insults you, it becomes your beef. So, but he was doing some really cool stuff. Like he was what he called it regression, like going sort of backwards to doing these weird old school looking pieces, and I think that was, you know, I think him and Exist really like flipped his style upside down.
As a writer now, do you see yourself more in the vein of like a traditional writer or more progressive?
I mean, I think that I was just more of an artist who got a bad grade at school and was looking for something else, and looking for something that I wasn't going to get marked for or judged, you know. It was like something that you could just do whatever. And, you know, I think what I do isn't limited to graffiti, or, you know, like now I'm doing sculpture, but, you know, like I feel like skateboarding's a part of my art, and now when I ride my skateboard in the street and I leave wheel marks in the city, to me that's my new tagging. So I don't know, I'm just like a performance. It's just like life is a performance, and it's a work of art, I guess. Everything, as you get older, for me anyway, as I got older, it's like everything has come together as one thing. Once something becomes a religion or a movement, and then people start manipulating people and trying to sell things, making brands and things, it's like, oh, we've lost it now, So if you can free it up and just make it, hey, like, there's no rules, and that question, what were the rules? What were your fundamentals? It's like, well, now that's all gone. Now you can just do what you want. You don't have to be a hip hop head who's into the 4 elements, and you don't
have to wear a cheese cutter.
You don't have to wear a cheese cutter and a puffy vest.
My question to you is also, in developing your own style, how do you not bite?
Well, I don't think you can't, because no matter what you do, it's your brain's like a sponge, and sometimes I'll call, like, when I have a break from art, it'll be like you're just a sponge, you're just absorbing stuff, and then suddenly you're like, bang, it's time to do art.
Yeah.
Like I've been looking at all these cool houses and Gothic architecture in Dunedin, and I'm gonna bite the shit out of it. So I think that's just a human thing, and to try and say that you're not gonna bite, or
well, then my next question would be, how do you bite and then flip it into something else?
I don't know, man. You could learn to do something. You could become an impersonator. Like you could do like exact replicas of someone's work for a moment, and then, you look at someone like Askew. He kind of did that, and he got hell for it. He did 3D graffiti, and he kind of did it so it looked like Lumit and Delta, and and I feel like he did move through a lot of the styles, and it was like he learned them and then learned everything from it, and then moved on to the next thing, and then got into like abstract art and looked at someone like Kane Kaser, or and then put that style into his thing, and now his stuff's like just such a mash of like everything that he's done, and and props to him, but I don't know, and then to not be scared to do that, and that's how art's always been taught. You learn from the masters, and that's what happened in the Renaissance,
And in terms of making these life decisions, in some ways, is there any critical kind of advice that has ever been given to you? It could be life advice or graffiti advice that you've thought was quite useful.
I just wish there wasn't such an emphasis on getting wasted and getting totally blind drunk. I think it was, a lot of the time it was about, like, when it was about stealing stuff, you'd steal alcohol, and it had this perceived value of like, this bottle's worth $300 or something, and so you'd drink it and get totally smashed, and then go do some graffiti, and you'd be so drunk that you'd get arrested. It's like, man, like, stay in control. If you want to do that stuff, then don't get drunk. Don't, keep it tight, like, stay in control and be calculated and, strategic, and do it the best you can. But yeah, we didn't do that.
One of the audience members have asked, can you tell us something about the Dunedin Leith Underpass show that you had?
Well, yeah, I moved down to Dunedin at the end of 2009, and to just bomb hills and do art. Like, I'd kind of had enough of Auckland, and I think I'd slipped back into like the drug culture, and I think I'd been done for drunk driving, and I kind of needed to sort my life out. They put me on like a 12-month probation, so I went down there, and just everyone was like, "Why are you moving to Dunedin? It's nothing down there." And I was like, "Exactly." And I was like, "I'm moving down there because it's a beautiful place." And yeah, and there were just so many walls, and no one was painting them. All the graffiti writers that I'd known from like earlier had all moved to Auckland and Wellington. So I just kind of moved down there, and there was just walls everywhere, and I kind of had started, by then I'd really started using paintbrush a lot. I didn't like the smell of spray paint and the effects. I felt like it was really wasteful, and the constant stalemate of people going over each other and just wasting paint kind of had killed the buzz. And so yeah, there's like the Leith River, and it had this like tunnel, and it was like 75 meters long. I mean, there's the whole river. There's like walls that go the whole river, and it's amazing. But
is it like a storm drain? Is that what it is?
Yeah, well, it's a river.
Yeah, okay.
But it's a river that turns, like, it's beautiful up the top, and then it turns into this big concrete stormwater drain. It's super cool.
Okay.
And like there was some really old graffiti in there that I kind of felt bad going over, but basically what I did was I decided that I wanted to do all this graffiti using grey graffiti paint, like anti-graffiti paint. And so I got Resine to send me like 100 litres of grey buff paint, and the idea was to do graffiti with anti-graffiti paint. And I sort of figured that if it was around the time when Auckland had been painted grey, and so I was like, well, if that's what you want, if you want grey, then I'll do some grey pieces, and then you'll have no excuse to paint it off, and I'll be like, oh, but it's grey, you know. And so it was the whole thing of disguising your graffiti, and you know, like camouflaging it, and at the time I didn't really realize, but afterwards looking at it, it was about, instead of writing on the wall and being graffiti's a mark on the wall, I wanted to become part of the wall. And yeah, so I ended up painting like just end-to-end outlines, and it was about 50 meters long.
Wow.
So it was just like, I did it over like 6 months through the middle of the winter, which was freezing. And then when I finished, I had a exhibition, but I just got everyone to meet at this bar and didn't tell them where it was. And then like I had all these LED torches and these big fire torches as well, and everyone had to like climb down this rock bank.
That's dope. Into
this tunnel, and it was like we did it at night, and I got everyone to like shine torches on the walls and have these big fire torches, and yeah, it was super fun, and it was I called it like the secret gutter expose.
That's dope.
And I know it was just super fun, and I know people in Dunedin are pretty cool. There's a lot of really open-minded people. A lot of people are into art, and it was just a real different take on graffiti. I mean, it's funny because like soon after that, like Riot moved down there, and I left, and like,
did he tag on it?
Oh yeah, man, like him and his son writes now too. So it was like, I went back down there, and it was like everything had just been, and I don't know, and there were a lot of other kids who sort of were doing graffiti, and they got pissed off that I'd taken 50 meters of the best spot. But you know, like I had that for 6 months, and I was just working away on it, and no one touched it. No one went down there. No one was doing any graffiti. Like it was just like, I don't know, I just found like a wonderland to be by myself and paint. Yeah, well, it's kind of cool too, because it was all done with like brush, and spray paint and brush. But like I look at it and I can still see the ridges. Like no matter how much they paint over it, I can still see the ridges of my piece underneath it all. And like, like I really started to think about the layers of paint, and like I've been thinking about that for a while. Like,
are we ever going to see anything on that kind of scale again?
I don't know. I mean, now I've started, like I said, that went from making a mark on the wall to like doing the grey and sort of going into the wall, and now I've started making things out of concrete. And so now I'm actually become the wall, and I think the next thing would
You've entered the matrix.
Yeah, like I think the next thing, well, like, I mean, and I just get sick of painting all this stuff, and then I spend all this time doing it, and then it's gone. And it's like what you're saying in some of your stuff about documenting stuff and taking photos of it so that it survives. And it's like, like photos are all good and stuff, but
even photos are not enough.
Yeah, like, and I don't know, I was like, I want to do something that's unbuffable. And so now I've started making stuff out of concrete that, like, you need a sledgehammer to buff that.
So what led you to deciding to use concrete to start making these artworks?
Well, I work landscaping, and also I grew up skating at Aotea Square on the monument there, which was like, it's quite a brutalist sort of bronze, and
yeah, I remember.
And even the Aotea Centre, like where I grew up skating, is quite brutalist. It's very concrete, and I think that, like I said, you're a sponge, and like that, I soaked up a lot of that, and I'd always wanted to make skateboard obstacles that were like monuments, sort of like the monument at Aotea Square, sort of like, not like so they look like they're skatable, but they are skatable. And I wanted to do that, and then I've always sort of done jobs where I do trades, like I've done house painting, building, landscaping, and then 4 years ago I got back into landscaping, and because we work with concrete a lot, started like, you're building boxing and stuff, formwork for stairs and walls, and I was like, hang on a minute, like I could box that up and cut the wood out and make it, my graffiti. And so I just started doing it. I'm making molds out of urethane to put concrete in, and then I go ride my skateboard, and the wheels are made of urethane, and I'm riding them on the concrete. So there's all these similarities, like everything sort of comes together, and I don't generally have a set plan. I just do what I like doing, and then yeah. But I am hoping there'll be something skatable at some stage.
In terms of making these concrete graffiti sculptures, what's the actual process behind that?
I guess like I could never really do 3D graffiti. Like I sort of attempted to draw it back when it was cool, when the German boys were going off, and I couldn't really do it. Like I could never pull it together, and it's kind of funny. Like the first time I just did like a basic cube, and I kind of like did a letter on each side, and I didn't really draw it in 3D or anything. I kind of just built it, and I had to build the mold backwards, and then it had to fit together in the corners, and it really fucks with your head. Like it was a lot of work and a lot of problem solving, but the end result was like, for me to make 3D graffiti, I actually had to build it, and that was the easiest way for me to do it and to understand it. And then different ways of like layering pieces of wood that you've cut out.
So does it start with a sketch first?
Or like an outline, and then like having to break that up into sections and layers. Like the first cube I did only had like one layer of like deboss, and then the next cube I did 2 layers. So, and that was a lot harder because you're doing everything backwards and in reverse.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
It's
So
challenging.
it was really challenging, but it was like, to me, it was kind of like solving small problems, and then like the end result, being able to build this thing. I was like cool. I'm just, everyone's good at different things, and so it's kind of like, and there's often more than one way to work out how to do something, and now, like, I'm not even, most of the stuff I'm making out of concrete now doesn't even have graffiti in it. I'm into like things like vents, like concrete vents, which and just kind of like brutalist forms and planters. I guess because I work landscaping, I like
Love it.
I love plants, so like I like making things out of concrete and then planting things in them and deciding what to plant. So it's like it has a nature aspect, and I don't know, it feels a little.
It's a very beautiful combination. Something really concrete, hard edged, and something that's organic.
Yeah, and I like that it's less sort of ego driven, and it's more like something that people can relate to. It's like people always relate to like any sort of a character or a human form. You know, you do like this badass burner, and everyone's like, oh, I really like that character of the funny little, dude or whatever. And so yeah, it's kind of nice just to be doing stuff that can fit in a space and make it a better space.
And so after creating all these concrete sculptures, where do they go?
Yeah, I mean, I've kind of been building them, and we did an exhibition, and I sold some of them, and now I've just been really slow to make more. And I know there's like, oh, you could sell this, you could sell that, and it's like, and it's almost like as soon as people start saying things like that, I start going, oh, I don't know, man. It's kind of fun just making them, and I definitely like giving them to people, and I do like selling them, and I definitely want to make more, but I just also like doing my day job, and I learned so much from like my day job and landscaping, and I make all right money. I make money every week doing that. That's almost better money than I would be if I was trying to peddle my art, trying to make something and sell it. It's like sometimes there's nothing better than a day job.
Could you tell me a little bit about your involvement with the recent Post Graffiti Pacific exhibition?
I guess I was doing my concrete stuff, and I can't actually remember how it happened, but it was somehow I ended up talking to Olivia Leiter, and she was wanting to do a show. No, because I did a show at her space in Onehunga. And
that was the Unbuffable, right?
Yeah, Unbuffable. And like she kind of was like wanted to do a Post Graffiti Pacific exhibition, and I was like, oh yeah, cool. I've got this new stuff that I'm doing, and so I kind of like was experimenting. So I mean, that show was pretty much just all my experimentation, my first experimentation, and we did that, and it was really cool. I mean, it was in Onehunga, so it didn't get like a huge turnout, but sold quite a few of the pieces, and and it was kind of cool to do something that, I've done a lot of painting exhibitions, so it was cool to do that and do it with her, like someone who's really organized and can sort everything out so I don't have to worry about it. And then she was doing the group show for the Sir James Wallace Trust, and it was like Petra Leary and Simon Ward's, like Gideon and a few other people, and so I was pretty stoked to have my stuff in there.
You've mentioned that you also have a day job, so you don't make art full time, or you do?
No, I don't.
So what do you do for your work?
I work landscaping, So like I drive the truck, so I do like pickups and deliveries and things, and it's physical, so it keeps me in a good routine. You know, you get up, you eat, you work physical, and you eat, and you sleep, and it keeps you in a good routine, which makes your brain function a lot better and stops you from getting into bad habits.
Has it ever been an aspiration for you to be a full-time artist or full-time skater or making music full-time? Has that ever been an aspiration?
Yeah, I think that it's been my aspiration a lot of times, and it's sort of like whenever it comes close to that, I usually freak out and go, wait a minute, I don't want to do that. Like I just worry that, you know, like, because I've experienced, you know, like working in the skateboard industry, and sometimes when your art and your love becomes work, and then inevitably there's going to be politics and there's going to be things like that, and then it doesn't become fun anymore. It just loses that specialness. And so, yeah, I quite like having a day job and just doing that, earning money, and then, you know, I do my art on the side. There's no pressure, and I don't have to do it any way. I don't have to pump it out, you know, like, oh, this thing's selling, so you have to pump that out, and, you know, you can just enjoy it.
That probably leads us really good into the next set of questions, which is really more about your opinions about certain different topics. How active are you now in painting graffiti?
I don't paint at all. Like the last piece I did in Auckland was a big grey piece, and I don't know, I got tagged all over and like pretty much straight away, and then just got gone over. I don't think they didn't understand what I was doing. I was trying to be a conceptual artist, you know. I was like, I kept hearing about all this conceptual art, and I was like, where do I sign up? And it's like you have to go to art school and like sign up and say, I am a conceptual artist. But yeah, the grey buff paint graffiti didn't seem to sort of catch on, and I just found that I just don't have time to pour all my time and energy into the streets if it's just going to get destroyed. I'd rather keep it for myself. And yeah, so I mean, today when I painted a piece for this, it was the first time I've done a piece with just spray paint in years.
What would get you out painting?
I don't know, if people approached me and they wanted me to come and paint with them on walls, then like legal walls and stuff, because I'm definitely not looking to get arrested or anything. But yeah, I mean that would, but it's, I don't know, I like making paintings, and my paintings are still my graffiti style. Like a lot of them have just been like squares, so they're pretty much just like a one letter symbol that says Levi. Or sometimes I've just let go of that and just gone into
abstract space,
which is also fun, because then you're just taking away all the
meaning,
all the restraints, and you can just kind of flow and do whatever.
What keeps you interested in lettering or graffiti after all these years?
Well, I don't know. I've watched this talk, and it was this guy who was talking about sigils.
Okay. What does that mean?
A sigil's like a kind of like a coat of arms, or like a sigil, like a symbol of your family, or like. And I feel like graffiti now has become like some of the square works I've done are like symbols that are like a representation of me, and like a logo or like an emblem. I don't know, I feel like it's a representation of myself. It's a representation of my skateboarding, being sort of like a b-boy, like the elements of your life, not necessarily the 4 elements of hip hop, but like the elements of your life and the things that you do, the work you put out there, the people that are inspired by your work. It's like, it's just like a representation of yourself and I guess your family and even this generation of your family, trying to span that mortality, as well. Like, I don't know, just trying to leave something behind and some sort of a mark.
I guess referring back to, all the years of spray painting that you've done, I know that you've kind of shifted more towards, roller paint. But have you ever encountered any health problems from spray painting?
I mean, we didn't wear masks a lot of the time back in the day, and I mean, I think it's definitely affected me. Like, I think my memory and things, like I said, I did really go off spray paint. I'd often feel really irritable after using spray paint. And yeah, it just kind of messed me up. I think, like, combined with heavy drinking, like you can end up, like, if you get too drunk on beer, like pissing the bed and shit. So like that could have, I don't know if that was just ridiculously heavy drinking or whether that had some part in that as well, but I try not to drink that heavily now, and I just bought a mask, so
yes.
So now I'm actually,
you're safe.
Yeah, like it's a good mask too, man. Like, painting today was like, I felt like I could breathe really well through it.
More generally, in terms of painting, there's obviously a whole bunch of new school writers, which have come up in the graffiti scene now. If they were to ever reach out to you and wanted to have a jam with you, would you be interested?
Yeah, man, I'll be down. Like, I don't know, like I said, I went right off painting, and most weekends I usually go skating and stuff, but yeah, man, I'll be down.
Cool.
That paint was real nice today as well. Like, the caps are so soft now, they don't like kill your fingers.
Has that always been the attitude that you've had, or was it back in the day like, oh, I wouldn't paint with you and you're friends with that person? And
no, I think we always would have painted with anyone unless we had beef with them, and then we still might paint with them. I don't know, like, it was like, I always liked that, like, just breaking the rules of whatever you're meant to do. But yeah, I mean, I sometimes like doing a spray paint piece, I don't know what the motivation is anymore. I don't know why I'm doing it. I guess it's sort of like when you talk about people painting trains for a photo, when painting trains was about it running and people seeing it. It's like, sometimes I just think that Auckland kind of crushed with the buff. The big buff crushed me, and I just kind of, it's just like it all went, and every time you paint it, it would just get painted over, and it was just like, wow, man, like I feel like humans, we're just using up so many resources, and to be pouring all this time and energy into just using up resources for photos that are digital, that if there was a sun flare, that'll get wiped anyway. It's like,
yeah, that's true.
I don't know, like, it's easy to get as you get older, it's easier to find yourself in an existential crisis. You gotta be careful.
There is quite a lot of graph popping up now.
Yeah.
What do you think of the Auckland graffiti scene at the moment?
Oh man, I catch the train to the city and I go skating, and I mean, just the West Line, like, I've seen heaps of tags and throw-ups, and I don't know, it hasn't been buffed yet, so I'm like thinking, oh,
will it happen?
Maybe the buffs, like, they haven't got any money for the buff, or they've started getting lazy, or, so that kind of gets me stoked. I mean, the tracks are looking healthy. There's pieces going up, and like, and that kind of makes me stoked. You know, like to go through Combat Zone and see pieces. I know, it just would be really good for the tracks to become the galleries that they used to be.
How do you think we collectively can continue to grow the graph culture, graph scene here in Auckland and New Zealand?
Oh no, don't grow it.
Why not?
I don't know, people should just do it because they want to do it. And I'm the same with skateboarding. I'm sort of like, people are like, yeah, we've got to grow the industry and all this stuff, and it's like, and I'm like, yeah, well, that's cool, but you know, with growth comes death. You know, like if the scene grows, then that might bring on the next wave of the buff, you know? But if it just sort of like tinkers along and
that's true,
there's a certain amount of graph going up and like, you know, they don't buff it all, and it, you know, maybe that could be
an interesting way to look at it.
Maybe that could be better, because like if it blows up, then it'll be like, graffiti's become a plague. We need to buff it all to push the house prices up, and you know, like the market's gonna crash or something. So yeah, I'm just kind of happy. I'm happy to see stuff out there, and I love the people that are just out there doing stuff and finding secret old places. You know, I mean, places like Christchurch, Dunedin, like places that I know, like after the earthquake, there's just so much like old abandoned things and
so much potential.
Like if I was a graffiti artist and an active graffiti artist in New Zealand right now, I'd move to Christchurch or Dunedin or somewhere. Although you got to be careful though, because if you get snapped for any sort of crime down there, they'll put you in the newspaper and name and shame you.
Are there any international kind of artists or graffiti writers that you're looking at?
I mean, I'm stoked on what Boris Telegon's doing, like Delta. Like he's just miles ahead with like, he's been doing 3D for so long, and he's doing stuff in concrete and bronze, and you know, like this stuff sort of looks like brutalism, and I love brutalism. I mean, I've been really stoked on learning about architects as well. Like I noticed on Instagram, like I got my art Instagram, and I got my skate Instagram pretty much, and then I got my art Instagram, so I just follow inspirational stuff, and a lot of that's like, you know, I love anything by like Frank Lloyd Wright, and yeah, like this. I mean, there's just so many mean old architects, and there's so much on YouTube, like watching documentaries about things, and all the Spomenik sculptures in like Bosnia and Croatia, and like the World War II war memorial sculptures. You should check them out, man. There's like an Instagram called Spomenik Database.
Okay, make sure to check it out.
Yeah, for sure.
Kind of while we're on the topic of, you know, the internet and the international scene, do you think that social media has been like a positive thing for graffiti or a negative?
I think it's cool that everyone can look at everyone's stuff, and yeah, I mean, and if you want to follow graffiti, you can pretty much just follow 1,000 different graffiti artists around the world, and just, you know, enjoy and love it. And you know, I mean, it's pretty funny. Like I remember, like there was like the hip hop NZ boards years ago, and I remember like all the like kind of beef and like internet beef, like as far as like internet beef with graffiti goes, like, oh man, that's the lamest thing ever. So
awesome. Well, leading into the last set of questions, which is just rapid fire, so they're just one word answers. Quality or quantity?
Quality.
Style or technique?
Style.
Color or chrome? Or grey, I should say.
Yeah, all of it.
Bombing or productions?
Bombing.
Okay. And any shout outs you'd like to make?
Yeah, I'd definitely like to shout out to all the DFH and MCF and all, like seriously, RFC, DAF, pretty much all the riders that have come out of Auckland or New Zealand, the Daggers, the DDC down in Dunedin, like Camo over in Melbourne, and Murder and Puzzle and everyone over there, and pretty much just everyone out there. Everyone out there is riding TMD, G-Back, and all the kids that are out there getting wild and keeping the train lines pretty.
Awesome, man. Thank you very much, Levi, for your time with us. We really appreciate your perspective, knowledge, and insight around your practice and thoughts around the graffiti culture. For me, that's incredibly important, to be able to carry some of that knowledge and history for the next generation. So you've obviously provided an incredible resource for all the riders here and aspiring riders in New Zealand and overseas. And I hope that for all the people that have watched and listened to this, that it's been insightful for you guys and inspiring and most importantly educative, and hopefully you've learned something. If you would like to see more of these videos, subscribe to my channel, and you can watch some of the earlier episodes on our playlist, which is a real-time web series. Drop us a like, share and comment in the comment section below, and let us know who you'd like to see in the next episode, and make sure you leave us some feedback or recommendations on how we can improve the series, because we want to keep progressing and making this better and better for you guys. So stay tuned for more episodes of the real-time web series.